Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another SPFBO or SPFBO live chat. This morning I was on with another fantasy book critic blog, but today in the afternoon we're going to chat with three amazing authors on Becky M's blog. Well, not for Becky M's blog, but whose books are assigned to Becky M for the self-published fantasy blog off. As many times as I've said that, I think I get it.
It's a long name.
It is. We've got a lot of people on Twitter and YouTube. Feel free to drop in the chat. Let us know where you're joining in from, and if you're a SPFBO contestant, let us know what group you're in, and we'll give you a shout out too while we're on today. For those who don't know about it, before I introduce all of the authors that we have on, I just want to very, very briefly say what SPFBO is. So essentially, 300 different authors submitted their self-published fantasy books to the blog off that Mark Lawrence has so graciously coordinated for all of us. And those 300 books are split among 10 different blogs, so 30 books each. And these panels have been going through introducing some of the authors and their works because there's a lot of great books this year. Hey, Lynn. So why don't we just kick it off with telling everybody a little bit about yourselves and what kind of fantasy you write? Because this is my first time meeting all three of you as well.
Who wants to go first?
Sure.
Volunteer as tribute.
I'll go first. Sure, why not? I mean, I seem to be, right beside you, so on the screen, so may as well begin with that order.
Okay, we'll just go around.
Sure. So, my name is Shan, and I'm an engineer by trade, and I've always been a big old fantasy fan, and have been reading fantasy since I was very young. I would say I was maybe 9 or 10 when I picked up the first sort of fantasy book that I found, and I believe it was Skullduggery Pleasant, and since then I've been reading them. And yeah, what kind of fantasy would I like? Well, see, I've seen that lots of fantasy authors like deep developed worlds with like huge histories behind everything, lots of lore for everything, and I was like, I don't want that. I want the exact opposite. I want the world that I build. So my world doesn't have a lot of history. The people there don't know a lot about it. There's no ancient books or stuff that you can read to learn about how great the past was. It will all be built going forward as the series progresses. That's my plan overall anyway.
So a really character focused book.
Yeah, highly character focused, but also as this story goes on, there'll be more and more world building about how the world changes because of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's the name of the book? Western Invasion, right?
Well, Western Invasion is technically the Cities of the River is like the title in like the series, I guess, and then Western Invasion is the sub book.
That's what I wasn't clear on.
Yeah,
because I'd seen it listed a couple different ways. I know it's in SPFBO as Western Invasion.
Yeah. Because they very clearly said on the rules only give like the name of the book, but not like the series title. And I was like, I guess Cities of the River is the series title, so I guess I won't do that.
Yeah, it only said it like 6 or 7 times. So.
It did.
Yeah. Hey, Steve. Steve's another author who's on.
Oh, nice. Well,
I guess. Did you have anything else to say? Anyone jump in front of you?
I don't know. Unless anyone has questions, I think we're ready to continue. Move on.
As far as fantasy genre, is there like a subgenre you would call it, or is it like epic fantasy, or what would you consider it?
Good question. I wouldn't call it epic fantasy, as it's not going to be like very long books. I don't want to write long books. I find it a chore to read like super long books as well. So I like it's only 60,000 words. It's the sort of book that you can probably read in a day if you really wanted to. Like it'll literally just take a couple of hours, and that's the sort of level I want to write. I don't want it to be super long. So just be like low level fantasy, and it'd be low magic fantasy is how I would describe it. It's fantasy because it's on a different place, not necessarily because there's magical things and creatures everywhere, though some of them might be in plain sight and you don't see them.
So you would call it secondary world fantasy?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
accurate. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
Awesome. So Simon, tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of fantasy you write.
Try not to call from the microphone. Um, I write dark fantasy. The book in SPFBO is Dark Lament. It is a crusader fantasy, which is not even a subgenre, but I'm working real hard to make it one. So it's, like I said, dark fantasy. It is the first book in the Black Crusade series, which again does not mention anywhere else but on the book cover. So
yeah.
We're planning probably 4 to 5 books. I've got most of 2 and part of 3 already done. So
Okay, that's pretty good.
And it's, for me, it was kind of a, this is gonna sound strange. What if Luke Skywalker had chosen the dark side to save Han and Leia, but fantasy and really dark? There's horror in everything I write, so it's not quite horror fantasy, but I would, if you read that first page, it's zombies attacking a kid and his family. So I mean, you call it what you want.
Yeah. So you said it's crusader fantasy. So does that mean it's going to have a lot of intrigue and political stuff going on and backstabbing?
I didn't get into that. Actually will come in the next book. The first book is really just how it's kind of looking at kind of the opposite of your book, because there is a big history with this world, and it takes the trope of the one, the prophesied one who will save the world. It's more the prophesied one who will destroy the world. Okay. So that's the main character, and it's kind of trying to present him as in a likable way, even though he ends up bringing about some pretty dark things. But there is a big historical component to it. There's actually a story within a story which tells the color crusades in this world is like the history of this world's crusades. And it is a religious conflict, but it is a secondary world fantasy. So everything it's just crusades inspired, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah. And Lions, so good to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Why is she?
Sorry.
Sorry, there was a tiny bit of a lag. Go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I can see myself lagging on the screen, which is messing me up a little bit. But yeah, I'm E.L. Lyons. Starlight Jewel is the book that I entered into SPFBO, which is the first in a trilogy, the Gifts of the Aldtree trilogy. I'm about halfway through with book 2 and editing as I go. It's a dark epic fantasy, a dark adult epic fantasy. I know everybody sees me and they think I'm writing YA.
I feel you. I feel it so deep. That is my jam right there.
I was trying to pick out what to wear. How do I make myself look my age? And I'm not writing young adult fantasy. But yeah, it is adults, and it's low magic sides, and it's a political fantasy as well, like Simon's. So it's kind of a mix of those, and it's alternate world, medieval times sort of, and there's Spriggans, so tree people, kind of like Ents, but not quite. Spriggans are actually Cornish lore, but I did a lot of things to them. They're not really like actual Spriggans in Cornish lore, which are fun, but still not the same. But yeah, that's my book.
Well,
I really like the cover, by the way. I had told you that on Twitter, but I really like your cover. I think it should have been one of the final finalists.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I think the cover is amazing. I know I'm a little bit biased, but I think they did an awesome job with capturing the book's vibes and tone. Just super cool. I was so happy about it. I'm still just over the moon every time I see it. So yeah.
You should be. It's awesome. I like it.
Thank you.
I'm a little biased myself because I design my own stuff. I used to be a cover designer. So.
Well, yours actually looks a lot more like dark fantasy, and when I look back at what mistakes I made in publishing this book, naming it Starlight Jewel, have small regrets about that. It kind of does sound kind of bright and happy. It's not. But yeah.
People can be in for a surprise. That can be a good thing,
Yeah. And I've had several people think that it was going to be like a Beauty and the Beast romance. It's also, it's not that. That's your dad. So.
I may have gone too far the other way, because when fantasy fans look at it, they kind of just look over it. When horror fans look at it, they go, "Ooh, that's creepy." So I'm hitting that mark, but maybe not the fantasy mark. So.
Yeah, the covers are tough. Like, I feel you so much, Lions, because mine is an epic fantasy as well. And while I love my cover and I think it's gorgeous, I got a lot of reviews going, "This is too dark to be YA. This is too mature for YA." I was like, I never claimed it to be YA. Nowhere, anywhere did I say this was YA.
Yeah.
But we really do judge books based on their cover. And I've thought about having the cover reworked for mine to make it more reflective of the tone and the feel. But
it's a cool cover. I like the way they did it. Just the effects. Being
Yeah.
a Photoshop geek myself, I really kind of got in there and looked at the minute details of it. I think it's cool.
Here's a random fun fact about my cover, but if you read the book and you pay attention to the cover, you'll notice that the person is actually standing on the wrong side of the river. But I was too late into development of the cover before I realized, oh my, no, he shouldn't be on that side of the river. But yeah, he's going to stay on that side now, even though it's not the correct side.
So when you get famous, people can pick that apart and you can just laugh.
You can be like, it was on purpose.
Well, not if they find this interview.
I was just testing you to see if you were
You say you're Shan's super fan, but if you are, what side of the river should his character have been standing on?
Yeah.
So is this the first year for all of you, or have you done SPFBO multiple times?
This is my
first year, yeah.
Same.
I didn't actually know about it until after I'd published my book, because after I published, I was like, okay, how do I advertise it? What are the ways to advertise it? I was like, oh, well, look at this. Here's Mark Lawrence, whose books I enjoyed. And look at him. He's doing something to help indie authors. So I was like, I have to enter this somehow. Then turns out that it wouldn't be on till May. So then I had to wait 5 months.
I actually knew about it before I even thought about publishing the book, because my cover designer follows Mark Lawrence and his books. So
I seen your designer pop up in the chat just now.
Did he say something? I couldn't see.
Just
let me pull it back up.
Shouting out.
Lots of great covers in the contest. Was thrilled to be counted among them. Congratulations. Yes. And thank you for recommending Lions to the to SPFBO. If anybody else is not following Mark, and you want to either follow him for updates on this year's SPFBO as a reader, or you want to follow Mark because you're an author wanting to do this next year, the link is in the YouTube description box. Definitely give Mark a follow. This is my first year too. I watched several friends do this the last 2 years, and this year I was like, okay, I'm going to be brave. Andrew D. Meredith and K.E. Andrews talked me into submitting a book. They're like, the worst thing that could happen is it goes nowhere. But then it was done. But even still, getting in this year, the competition has been great. And you're the first panel here representing the people who were assigned to Becky M's blog. How do you feel about the books you're in with? And have you read any of Becky's prior reviews? What's your mindset going into SPFBO?
That was the first thing I did. I just went to her channel. I was like, how hard is she going to be? How hard is she going to be?
I've looked at her channel, but I haven't quite watched any of the videos yet. I guess it's the same question that you have there, Simon, but I'm sort of afraid to look just in case. What's she going to be like? Do I want to know or do I not? Do I want it to be a surprise or do I want to know? It's a tough question. Yeah.
I wanted to know, and she seems very fair. She's very knowledgeable about story structure and characterization, and she gets really into the details of it. Just from looking at some of the stuff she's done in the past, I can tell that I was afraid she'd be put off by dark fantasy. So I don't feel like she is. That's good news for us, Lions. So I'm just curious to see, how she'll react, because it's not a conventional book.
Yeah,
I've been
I watched a
writing
few
for
of
20
her.
years. Go ahead.
Yeah, I watched a few of her videos and got the same impression that she's like kind of more widely read in fantasy, and that she almost has like an academic approach to some aspects of her reviews, which I thought was really fun. I'd be happy, like, even if she just tears my book apart. Like, I just don't want to be in the slush pile that doesn't get mentioned at all.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I know some of the blogs are doing a thing where they have enough people that they're going to just spread the books and everything gets read. I just hope that like something like that happens. I'd like my book to at least get read. I hope my
I think
cover's
she's
appealing to
doing it
Becky M.
all on her own. But she reads fast. That's another thing I noticed. If you look at some of her, like she does the 24-hour reads where she'll read 4 or 5 books. And these aren't little books. So
Mine is a little book. That's great.
Mine's not. Mine's 494 pages. So.
How much?
And if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually follow Becky and see Becky's blogs and reviews here on YouTube at Becky M. And Becky does read fast. Reads really fast. As a person who reviews on the side, I was sort of nervous putting my own book in because I'm not known for being the gentlest of reviewers. And I really liked Becky's approach, because that's sort of my approach. When I review a book, I don't review it based on my personal opinion of, I like this trope, I don't like this trope, I like this content or don't like this content. I try to base it on, here is what's considered good in this subgenre, and the book either meets that or doesn't meet that, and remove my personal feelings from it somewhat. And Becky is very, like, she has personal opinions, but it seems like she's also, like you said, Lyons, just very detailed with why she reviews the way she does.
Yeah.
I come from an academic background, so it's really good to see that. And my degree is in creative writing, and I'm in the MFA program now, so it's kind of like what I'm used to seeing, just in day to day. But she really knows her stuff, so I'm excited to see what comes out of it.
Yes. So we've been doing this little thing on the panels where I've been asking them to talk about one type of character. We've talked about main characters, we talked about villains, we talked about best friends and favorite side characters, and this morning we talked about favorite non-human characters. And today we're going back to talking about main characters, but we're going to talk about stakes specifically. So what is at stake at the beginning of the story for the character? You don't have to spoil it by telling us whether or not they achieve it or anything like that, but when they start their journey, what do they think their journey is? What's at stake for them if they fail? And what do they see as victory?
Well, the way I've structured my story, there isn't actually one main character. There is. Sorry, can I still be heard? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. And I guess the character which the story opens with, named Belris, the story opens up with him having lived on the family farm for 3 years now after coming back from his old life as a soldier. And as a soldier, at some stage, something bad happened, and he gave up on that life and returned home to live with his brother and the kids. And since then, he's had a great life. He knows his nieces and nephews, loves them greatly. The farm is great. And then, that's all broken up right after that, where everyone's dead. He's the last survivor because there was an attack coming in from the west. They've all been watching refugees coming in from the west, and now there's no one there. And his journey is all about getting revenge for what happened. He wants that. He needs that. It's the second time in his life he's lost what he considered family, and he doesn't want to deal with that again,
Yeah. They've got a character who's wanting family, essentially, or wanting to belong.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, with revenge, it sounds like yours is a dark fantasy as well, if like your main character is on a quest for revenge.
I mean, see, I don't know what counts as dark fantasy or not.
I think that's debatable.
Yeah, because like I don't really have any horror elements in it really. I mean, are there dark scenes in it? Yes. Like, when he finds the bodies of like, his family the next day when he managed when as he watches everyone die, that's dark, yeah, but it doesn't really focus on the dark. That's just something that happened, I would say, rather than making it dark fantasy. Though some could consider dark fantasy. I don't know if I would uh, personally.
So for
Yeah.
me, dark fantasy is, from my work anyway, dark fantasy is horror in a fantasy setting with fantasy tropes. I don't know if you agree with that or not, Lions. I think there are a billion different ways to look at it, just like grimdark. Nobody agrees on what it is exactly.
Yeah, I guess the dark elements to the world is like, and the characters is more what I classify as dark fantasy. Like if I was to label it, but yeah, I agree. There's no agreement on grimdark and dark, but yeah, I don't have any horror elements in my book either. But the characters are all pretty much morally gray, and the world is kind of very messed up and disturbing. So I guess that's why I put it in dark fantasy.
I can see
So I
that.
had a couple panels around New Year's that were dark fantasy, grim dark fantasy, epic fantasy. And one of the things that we got asked a lot during that panel was what makes something, dark versus noble bright fantasy where it's not dark. And one of the answers that I thought really summed it up well was how much hope there is in the story. Like a noble bright fantasy or epic fantasy, will take Lord of the Rings for example, gets pretty daggum dark at the very end, but there's still hope, and at the end there's redemption even if the characters are changed in a dark way and are never really the same. Where a lot of the dark fantasies, it's sort of which is the lesser of two evils. There's not really going to be a good ending, and necessarily, I mean, there can be, but it's not. Look at the end of Game of Thrones. There's no real winner. Spoiler
Is there
alert,
an end
everybody.
yet?
If you're looking, for what the TV show stuck on
Yeah.
the end, where the books are still out. But yeah, it's a whole lot darker, almost more. I don't know. Not that hope doesn't exist. It just doesn't stand out the same way. Um, so I'll actually drop the link if you're watching on YouTube. It's sort of gibberish link here to the dark fantasy panel where the authors were talking about what they think about that. But I saw a debate on Discord about that today, actually, about what's dark and what's not dark.
And I guess my other question to that would be what counts as hope? What is hope the feeling that the individual characters have to achieve their goals, or is hope just an uplifting feeling throughout the tone of the story? Because you could say that my characters are hopeful that they'll achieve their goals, whatever they happen to be, but then I don't know if the story itself is hopeful or not.
I think most
Oh.
characters should be hopeful.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can have a depressed character, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But you want a character that's going to move the story in a direction, and you're not going to move toward despair. You're going to move toward hope. I mean, that's the way I see it. So I think the characters probably should have hope, but the readers, do they have hope for what the outcome is going to be?
Yeah.
And Dark Lament, Vass is the main character, and in my life, I've had many situations where there was no right answer. There was no good answer. It was the less crappy answer. And that's kind of the situation I put him in. And then there's, like, he makes some really bad decisions that make things worse. And every time he thinks he's doing something to make it better, it gets worse. But it's based on, like, some past trauma and things that really, like, you understand why he makes the decisions he makes, even if you're like, no, don't do that. At the same time, it's like, okay, I kind of see why he did that. So he's also, tragic past. I mentioned that opening scene is him as a little boy seeing his parents killed by a bunch of undead, just zombies, fantasy zombies, whatever you want to call it. And then he sees his mother killed, and then she opens her eyes and goes after him, and like where he's hiding, and snatches him up. So that's his trauma that he carries with him.
Mm.
And so all of his decisions are based on the idea of not wanting to lose anybody else, which he's being trained as a clerical healer, as a spiritual healer. But when that doesn't work, like someone close to him dies and he freaks out and a darker entity offers to help and he accepts it out of that sense of trauma and loss. And then when he tries to make that right, things just keep getting worse and worse and worse. There is hope, but it's not in this book. There's hope for the characters that you care about, but I'm just going to tell you everybody else is screwed. So,
like Shan and you both have characters who really are trying to not lose more people and find their people. How about you, Lions? What's at stake for your main character? What journey do they think they're starting out on?
So Axley is a slightly morally gray character, but she actually has most of her family, sort of. Her dad is on the cover. It's the Aldtree. But she's trying to protect her brother. That's the main motivation of the book. She has like a human half-brother who has, kind of this gift that can be used in a really not good way that could destroy the world. So she's kind of trying to protect the world as well by protecting him. Mm-hmm. And she mostly does that by killing people and, sometimes good people, because she's trying to keep that secret and, protect different factions. Since it is kind of political, there are different countries, and then there's the Starlight Company, which is like all the Spriggan hybrids, and they're like assassins and seductress thieves, basically, and that's how they support, the new half-breeds that are coming into the community, because the humans don't want to take care of them, and the Spriggans aren't going to take care of them, and so the hybrids, have to create this little criminal organization to support them. So her motivations are basically just to keep everything together, and there is hope. It's not founded. So when you start feeling hopeful, understand that that's not going to work out.
So sort of like Lemony Snicket here.
Well, no, Lemony Snicket likes to tell you how often.
I know, he's just like, so you don't leave me a bad review. Let me tell you right now. And let me remind you.
It's not a happily ever after, and but yeah, so it's Axley is her motivations are mostly just to keep the world alive, and she doesn't have any particular moral qualms about how she does that, and she may be working against herself a little bit. She's kind of like her story's own villain. There are other villains too. There are definitely people trying to kill them or abduct them and things like that. But
I think motivation is the key. I mean, a good villain is the hero of their own story, and telling a story from a morally great perspective, where you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. That's all I care about. As long as I understand why they're doing what they're doing, and the ending, as long as it resolves the conflict, it doesn't have to be happy. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to make sense and resolve the conflict that's been established.
I think in this first book, I kept it simple and made an obvious bad side, and that's like the Western invasion aspect of the book. The people coming from the West, they're the clear bad guys. But also, like, the different states that exist, they're not exactly happy with each other. They've been at war for whatever number of years. 256 is the number that they all agree on. Definitely it's that many years, but some say it goes back 1,000 years. But yeah, like, I just wanted something simple. Like, yeah, these guys bad, these guys less bad, in the sense of these guys are the good guys that you're meant to be vouching for. It's really in the second book, which I'm like, in the second draft of at the moment, where I open up the bad guys from the first book as more complex people than just coming in from the West to take over the world.
Yeah.
Starlight Jewel has like 3 different villains, but only one of them is only one of those issues is resolved in the first book. The other two villains are kind of like, they're going to be bigger in the second book, and they're kind of like on her side in this book, but you can see that they're on her side for very wrong reasons. Not that she's on her own side for a good reason, but
I love good versus evil and like tropes when they're spun so that there's that genuine real life gray area. And the one I've submitted for SPFBO this year, there is a villain, but I'm not going to lie. I'm the author and I shouldn't have prejudice against my own characters, but I like the villain a little better than I like the main character. Because I guess I feel like she does the very bad things for very seemingly good reasons. She just goes about it a very wrong way. And
I think
definitely deserves. But yeah, I love the villains that make a main character stop and go, am I as good as I think I am? Or was this person I admired as good as I thought they were? I feel like those are great tropes. And if a character can grow by the end of a book, where they start out thinking, I'm the good guy, and then they realize, oh, wow, I've got these things and I've become a better person. That's really a great story. So I know we're about to run out of time, but I did want to touch base real quick. We've got 5 months, we were talking about earlier on the first panel today, to wait and see who goes through this round. What are you guys going to be working on book-wise for the next 5 months? Are you writing, editing, chilling and watching, like lurking and watching on the blogger sites? What's going on?
Well, as I said, I finished off the second book, first draft, and I'm about halfway through the second draft at this stage. I'm going to slowly go through that. I don't know whether I'll get that published by the end of this year. It really depends on how many sales I can get, because if I have to wait for my own money to slowly regenerate in terms of just job money, then I'll wait till next year to publish it, which is fine, but it just means that I'll just move on to book 3. I've written the first chapter of that too, but then had to go back to book 2 because book 2 wasn't fully finished yet. But I imagine in a couple of months' time, I'll be looking for some extra beta readers to help me, because I have a couple of friends, but I may want a couple more. That's it in terms of book stuff for me for the next couple of months.
Get in touch with me on Twitter. I'd be willing to beta read for you.
Wish I was on Twitter.
Or
I need to get on
Facebook.
Twitter.
That's why we couldn't find you.
Yeah. I really need to make a Twitter account or something, because I know that like social media is great to advertise things, but I've just never been a social media person.
And that's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
And as a writer, it's kind of an isolating existence. So it is nice to rub elbows with other authors and people who understand. Like you could talk to anybody about your writing and what you go through, and will kind of get it maybe, but sometimes it's very isolating. And I'm more on Facebook than I am Twitter. I've been slowly building my Twitter over the years, but I haven't used it a whole lot.
I will say SPFBO for me, the biggest win has been the community, and not just readers, connecting with people who really want to read these kind of books, but actually other writers. You're realizing you're not alone. There doesn't have to be a bubble. There's a huge support community. So yeah, totally getting plugged in. What about you, Lions? What does the next 5 months look like for you?
I'm going to be continuing with the sequel to Starlight Jewel and the Gifts of the Eltree trilogy. The first book ends in kind of a terrible place. And, so I'm just continuing to dig her deeper into that hole. So that's my plan. And then I've got my side project, Bad Knack, which is completely different, my fantasy humor short story series. So I'll probably keep working on that too. Redneck fantasy humor, just before anybody goes and looks it up and then is surprised. Those are the only 2 things I'm working on right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to chat with us about your books and your writing and SPFBO. I wish you all the very best of luck. I wish all of us very best of luck.
Yeah,
And thanks
good luck to you as well.
Thank you. And same to Steve and anybody else who's watching, who's participating. I will have several more panels over the next couple weeks introducing more authors from the blogs. I will not have all 300 authors, but I'll have some. So subscribe to the channel if you'd like to meet more fantasy authors. And we'll see you next time. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.